Hello, my name is Albert DeGenova, and I'll be reading some of my poetry for you today for the Emily Dickinson Poetry Series. I'm very honored and flattered, actually, to be invited to participate in this important reading series. I think it's a very special audience, and I'm especially grateful to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Door County for having me, and especially to Estella and Chuck Lauder for making this all happen. I'm going to read some old poems and some newer poems. I hope you enjoy them. I'm going to start with a poem that's I'm very proud of. It's won a couple of awards, and it's the title of one of my books. Poetry, the word itself, the etymology means to make. So here is a poem about making, and it's called A Good Hammer. Blessed are the splinters, the little cuts that never bleed, the dark blue-black fingernails. At 53 you long for more hours as a carpenter, nailing and planing, a pencil behind your ear, sawdust on your shoes, the clean, sweet smell of fresh-cut lumber in the basement, the backyard, in the new attic bedroom, eager for that brief moment when you close the toolbox and exhale the good and strong of completion, something your sons can sit on, climb up, or walk under. What is a marketing manager anyway? A son should see his father's work, see that a sound joint fitted in the wind will hold against rain and hail and time, should remember his father's sweat. Learn the only tool he needs, finally, is a good hammer, love he can hold in his hand. And I'm going to follow that up with some older poems. These are from a book called Backbeat, which I'm very proud to say was published by No Reply, and eternally grateful for that. That was my first book. And some of you may have seen me perform with music before. Some may not be aware, but I've done a lot of poetry readings with musicians, and often even bringing my own saxophone to the readings and having a lot of fun with that. So today I'm going to try and add a little music to the presentation. And I spent a lot of time playing the blues in Chicago, a lot of time on stage and long nights, and it was a lot of fun. So I'm going to start with a poem called Enough Space. Give me the blues, give me the blues. All the space I need is 3 chords to tell a howlin', you beautiful honey, knuckles crackin' at sunup story. Give me the blues, with deep pockets of bass rhythm that pumps like the heart of black earth and dreams deferred. The blues is enough room to breathe, is 3 chords and a bit of sunlight through dirt and smoke-fogged windows. The blues is an attic garret in Paris or Prague or New York or Chicago, or a sharecropper's shack in Bogalusa, Louisiana, where art, without any name at all, first cries its bee-wah-wah, bee-wah-wah da. Give me enough space. Give me the blues. And I'm going to follow that with a poem. I did a reading once at a library, and it was with Charlie Rossiter, who is a friend and fellow poet. We did a lot of performances together. I would bring my saxophone, he would play percussion, and we did a reading once at a library where no one showed up. But despite the fact there was no audience, the librarians still had questions and answers, and one of their questions was to tell them something about my saxophone. Well, this is the poem that came out of that, and it's a villanelle for all the poetry geeks out there, the first villanelle I ever wrote, and it's still my favorite form to write in when I do write in form. So here it is. When asked, tell us something about your saxophone. Well, it's been with me a long, long time. It is the backbeat in my bones, swaggering through nights of smoke and moan, a brassy whore of musk and wine. I'll tell you something about my saxophone. A voodoo spell of chants and stones. It's filled with grinding and blues and rhyme and more. It knows the crying in my bones, knows the unanswered echo of a telephone, has traveled the roads of lies and crimes. Let me tell you about my saxophone. Sometimes it has a mind of its own. Its reedy voice don't sound like mine, yet it's always ringing through my bones. In my hands it feels like home, a curious marriage of wind and time. I'll tell you about my saxophone. It is the singing in my bones. And from there, from the blues clubs, I'm going to move into a new area. I think in these times, the poet his job is to bear witness, and I think it's important for artists of any stripe to bear witness of their lives and the world around them. I'm going to read a couple poems about growing up as a white person on the south side of Chicago in the middle of very deep racism. And I think it's important for white folks who claim not to be racist to actually look into their own histories and see the world that they grew up in and be able to admit to it, to truly understand what it means to be white in America and where we came from. And some of this probably is not as relevant to the millennials out there, but certainly to the baby boomers and of course the Generation X folks, the people that came after us, baby boomers. Some people may not have had similar experiences, some may have had worse, but I think as a poet I need to bear witness to where I came from and where I'm at today. I've done a whole series of these poems. I'm only going to share two with you today. The Privilege Blues. What right, this white boy, to play blues, as if with his shiny saxophone he could know the black of blues. In 1982, alone I listened, waited for my turn to take a place on stage at the Kingston Mines Monday Night Blues Jam. I kept coming back week after week alone, but jamming and sitting in and being invited on gigs. I earned a nickname, Bossa Nova, but not a spot in the back seat out in the alley on breaks. Not even after Lefty Diz announced to packed house Saturday night applause, now that boy has the blues. Not when I told Big Gary with his vintage King tenor saxophone, you got the sound, and he said, but you've got the fire. Especially not after 4 a.m., sore lip gigs, all night on stage, a plastic beer cup at my foot, and breaks of wild turkey shots when I walked haltingly home alone. 5 blocks to my shared bathroom, rooming house studio, streetlights and long shadows, almost dawn. No cop ever pulls up to check my blue eyes. My saxophone case in hand to accuse, where you going, boy? And this next poem starts with an epigraph from Maya Angelou. Forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it. And I hope I learned something, Maya. Anyway, here this poem is titled Kissing Blackface. Lenore Schnarr, 17-year-old beauty, sexy the way Catholic schoolgirls were sexy in Chicago in 1973, never said yes to any of my many invitations, but she finally agreed to be my date, a Halloween party in my best friend's basement, her promise, a Playboy bunny costume. She arrived, a pillow-bellied Aunt Jemima, deep red lips and blackface. Her joke was on me. My schoolboy crush hung on the lip of a beer can. The guys laughed, she laughed, as we danced under green and blue lights that couldn't dim her lie, her rouged lips, her fake drawl taunts. Gonna ask me out again, white boy? I kissed her to spite her as we sank into an old couch. My ire was unashamed. Her mammy mask smeared across my cheeks. I kissed Lenore's white-smiled insult on the lips. My nascent defiance of her whiteness, I kissed Blackface. And we are unforgiven. With a focused and wide lens, I search in and out of all those basement corners, repentant. Yet the present tense remains a grim confessor. I dance again and again with that painted devil. The mortal debate, wrong becomes more wrong, and I go face to face with my pointed anger, lay bare the shame of my own cold memory, clenched-jawed in that old Chicago neighborhood, the ugly shadow still hiding just around every corner. And now I change gears a little bit, but still want to bear witness a bit to our times and our current political situation. This poem, We Thought We Could. I'll hold the umbrella, your arm in mine. We'll walk through the looking glass, through the ink-filled rain, through what's left of our meaningful dream, peer back at our scribbled vanity. We hide under desks and behind our tailored cloak of connectedness and precious handmade chapbooks. It's all too much lettuce. Our reality sandwiches are rubber playthings, those old and dry manifestos. The barren, poison-tipped bullets of privilege are forged of synthesized metals. Where is blind Cupid's golden bow gone like so many mythic dreams ended? The alarm clock, buzz, buzz, buzzing, our awakening out of reach. We've put the pillows over our heads with easy posts and angered shares, outstretched fingers that hope and fail to touch more than this wasted, bombed-out Camelot. Transform malaise our bourgeois curse, squeeze wine from intoxicating poems, exalted, taste the profits of jazz, of rock and roll, of benevolent science, their golden ruled breasts, and know again the black and white of sin's responsibility. The alarmed alarm shakes the yes we can dream that was America. No poetry to this dark morning, no trust for a rising sun. I've nothing to offer but my own confusion, caught between the singing Buddha and the hot, smoking barrel of the dark dynamo, menacing in the machinery of the night. And from there, I want to change subjects, move into some family poems. You know, things with family are always changing, dynamics change, and now that I spend part of my time in Sturgeon Bay and part of my time in Chicago, things are changing again, and all for the better, I think. But here's some poems about family. This first one is called Family Album. These are pictures of my family. Smell the garlic sautéed in olive oil and poured over blanched escarole greens. The stale air of transatlantic steerage fused with the sweat and bad breath, the rotting teeth of Napolitan poverty. The oily coal smoke that replaced sea air forever, the long ride New York to Chicago one way. These are pictures of my family. Fading color slides and plastic sleeves that account for a decade, the 1950s, the fulcrum years when my family teetered between the slum streets of Naples and Southside Chicago unpaved alleys and suburban subdivisions. My grandparents with enough English to play with their grandchildren, my young American parents who never spoke their parents' language to each other. We are the babies. These are pictures of my family, eating and smiling, singing happy birthday day, preserved in plastic, just like Grandma's sofa. The sofa that discolored anyway, the streets that were paved, we grew up, those who remembered Ellis Island have been buried. We no longer are guinea dock rats. We are no longer sweating dark-skinned immigrants. We no longer dig the ditches for Chicago's sewers, no longer lay the bricks of the city's skyline. These are pictures of my family. I breathe these pictures into my lungs and smell my grandfather's cigar, his wine press, and the emptied oak barrels. My sons read this family album like a textbook, the dry branches of a family tree, the sterile history of lineage. My sons will never know what an Italian smells like. We are become Americans with Italian names, tossing old country phrases, bocce balls that miss the mark. And now I'm going to move to a poem. Proud to say that this poem won an Allen Ginsberg Award, and it's always nice to be able to have some recognition for your work. This poem came from my cousin, who shared a photograph after her mother passed. She was going through things and cleaning out chores, and found this picture. And this is a poem that would be termed, I guess, an ekphrastic poem, but it's a direct response to that photograph. 1/60th of a second. He is almost out of the frame. Maybe he is hesitating, trying not to step into the picture. Leaning on the back door with one hand, the other hand in his pocket, looking down, not at the camera, not at the aging woman in the backyard of this 4-flat apartment house. He may not want to interrupt her. The woman is sitting on a simple wood bench, surrounded by potted Easter lilies and hydrangea, which she is cutting. The flower pots are decorated with foil and bows, perhaps leftovers from her church. The kitchen windows are open to let in the late spring air. She wears no sweater over her plain apron and short-sleeved house dress. She is busy, careful, focused on her work. He is young, 19 or 20, already dressed beyond the means of this simple backyard, this working-class home in 1950 Chicago. His white dress shirt hangs open, tails out of dark dress pants, sleeves rolled up. He isn't looking at his mother or at the photographer, who is probably his older brother. She is at the center of the picture, unaware of the camera. She can't see the son who keeps his distance, waiting to walk through the frame. He could easily reach around the corner of the building and touch her. Black and white, shadow upon shadow, a frozen 1/60th of a second. What little illumination there is. He is my father. This as well as I know him. And this poem is about my mother, who passed just a little bit over a year ago. She fought the hard battle against Alzheimer's, and she fought it all the way. But here's a poem for her, and this one is called First Love. You who loved me first gave me words. Now I offer them back. You forget sometimes, so I complete your sentence. You were 19 years old, counting my toes, your firstborn. We've grown up together. I was in the back seat as you learned to drive. With no one on my sidelines, you sent my uncles. Today, at 57, I have friends your age. Time, that elastic measure, so much living between us. Your life, my life, the slant rhymes I've left out. We've an unheard language. No need to read your yellowing journals, the passions you couldn't say out loud. I understand, and maybe our living is enough. You just a few steps ahead, reaching back to take my hand. Look both ways, you say again and again, you who I loved first to the last word. And now I'm going to close today's reading with a poem that is the title poem for my most recent book, which is called Black Pearl. This is a love poem, and the collection is a collection of poems of love, sex, and regret. Three subjects which work pretty well together, I think, in life and in poetry. And so I'm going to close today with Black Pearl. I hear a faraway cello, legato tone as long as life itself it seems. The horsehair bow turns on edge. The timber winces to the wind, to the thunder. The Pacific reshapes miles of beach overnight, sometimes in minutes. Waves, their sucking recoil. The salty tumult teases me today with nothing more than a bruised hip. How dare I rest against a rock? From within the splashing crash, I hear a muffled baritone's tempt. What waits for you within the churning wave? I've heard love sound like this. My God is not this heaving brute of sea, but a quiet black pearl in the shell of my heart. I feel the hair on my arm move as it dries. The flies bite my ankles. Too much love in my one stormy life to ever deny God. Well, I'll end there, and I thank you all for your time and for listening to these poems. And again, I'm very grateful to the UU Fellowship of Door County for this opportunity. Thank you again, and I hope to see you around town. If anyone wants to find me or send me a message, I'm online as Albert DeGenova, and I hope to hear from you. Thank you again.